For the next section, we're going to talk about self-control. Self-control is one of the primary uses or functions of the self, and like it sounds, is us trying to control or exert some semblance of control on ourselves, our behaviors, and our actions. To some degree, our feelings as well. To a lesser degree, we can control our thoughts, or at least attempt to control our thoughts, though at the end of the day, this is not something we're actually very good at. Just an example to illustrate this, I would like you to try as hard as you can, and you can hum or sing or do whatever you want, but please don't think of the image of a crow. And my guess is by now, most of you have already thought of the image of a crow. It's just, we can't help ourselves. It's kind of how the mind works. We think about stuff that's around us, and it's actually, some research has gone to demonstrate that as many or as much as 50% of our thoughts can be accounted for by the previous thought that we had and what is currently around us in the environment. One means, or very common means, of self-control is suppression, and suppression refers to the process of exerting control by attempting to push certain thoughts out of our mind in an attempt to not think about them and thus avoid certain behaviors. Now, as you just saw with that silly example of the crow, research has shown that this is a largely ineffective strategy for exerting self-control, and in many ways it backfires. What this means is you are able to successfully suppress an intention or urge for a little while. After a while, you get tired or exhausted or something happens, and that ability to constantly maintain this negation loses its potency, and eventually one will cave and then give in to that behavior. And if not that particular behavior, perhaps then some other behavior that you've also been trying to keep yourself from engaging in. Just as a side note here, suppression is an unbelievably common strategy that gets used in emotion regulation, and it is not only ineffective for the most part, it has actually been linked to both negative health outcomes and negative memory outcomes. So this is true more so for men than for women, and in other cultures than some, well, depending on the culture, but again, why I bring up the gender difference, many men have been socialized to continually suppress their emotional states, to not express them, to not show them, to not talk about them, even though certain women are also told to suppress certain types of feelings and thoughts, and it just applies across the board, really. The problem with this is, in exactly the same way as you're trying to exert control on your actions, it only works for so long. There's only so long that you can keep feelings at bay before they will tend to overwhelm us. Because when we are trying to suppress feelings, we're not actually dealing with the root causes of those feelings. And oftentimes those root causes are never addressed. They're in our environment and they keep eliciting those same negative feelings over and over and over. And that just doesn't change. And just trying to suppress your own feelings is not an effective means of being able to control your own emotional state. I'm not saying that there aren't certain situations in which it is appropriate to suppress your feelings, right? Like, let's say you're at a funeral and you have this one friend who is completely irrelevant and they tell you a hilarious joke while you are at the funeral itself. And there would be a really good situation in which you should probably suppress the joy or laughter that you're feeling in that case because it's inappropriate. When it comes to, say, let's say a heartache or something like that, it is not a good idea to suppress those negative feelings, as you will never be able to heal and process effectively. Yeah. A more effective way of exerting control on ourselves is through something called implementation intentions. If you want to read more about this, I believe Gowitzer is the author behind this. This refers to the idea of exerting control on our future behaviors by crafting small and tangible goals as opposed to large and general ones. So an example of this would be, I'll study psychology for 30 minutes every day as an example of a small tangible goal, compared to I'll study for my psych exam in 2 weeks, which is a relatively large and general one. When we make our small plans, we're much more likely to stick with them. Not only are we likely to stick with them, but we are more likely to accomplish them regularly as well, which will bolster our motivation to continue doing them. And it has been largely demonstrated across the literature to be an effective means of controlling ourselves. So this can also be used as a way to mitigate our behaviors, right? If you are someone who watches Netflix for 5 hours a day, instead of saying, I'm just not going to watch Netflix, you can continually try and reduce the amount of Netflix you watch by, say, 15 to 20 minutes every week or so. This is something very common that one finds in exercise and weight loss situations. Much advertising in this country, and I guess really most places in the world now, advocate stuff like lose 30 pounds in 4 weeks or something like this. And at the end of the day, this is just not realistic and doesn't take into account the way our bodies actually work. An ideal way of losing weight is estimated, at least in the nutrition and scientific community, to be about a half a pound a week, all the way up to a half a pound every week and a half, 2 weeks. If you lose weight more quickly than this, it is just a matter of your willpower being lacking and you eating and going out and doing something in these other behaviors, and you will just gain all that weight right back. It doesn't actually help you to maintain losing the weight in the long run. In order to do that, one needs to, like I said, lose weight in this slow and gradual manner. One finds this all over the place. Quitting smoking is one of those prime examples. While very few people can quit completely cold turkey, for the most part people need to taper off, slowing down their consumption of cigarettes, oftentimes replacing the actual physical activity with something else like chewing gum, followed by eating nicotine gum or patches and slowly weaning themselves off the nicotine. With caffeine, one finds exactly the same thing. One is unlikely to be able to maintain these behaviors with stark and huge cuts in our actual behavior. Lastly, this leads to willpower. And as we mentioned before, one of the reasons suppression is just not effective is it takes willpower to suppress our thoughts and feelings, and willpower is just not an infinite resource. After some time, willpower will wane, and those thoughts and feelings will come right back. It has even been shown that this tracks during the course of a day, where we have more willpower in the morning when we get up, and we will tend to have less and less willpower throughout the course of the day. This is at the end of the day why, if you have a chocolate cake that is just a beautiful chocolate cake sitting there on the table, but you're also on a diet and you're like, nope, don't eat any chocolate cake, nope, don't eat any chocolate cake, nope, don't do it, don't eat chocolate cake. At the end of the day, it's really hard not to eat that chocolate cake, and chances are by a day or two you'll have a slice of that chocolate cake. And then one feels bad. Feeling bad actually reduces our willpower even further, and then in order to deal with the negative emotional state, one oftentimes can end up binge eating, and so you'll eat more of that chocolate cake, and it's just a horrible cycle. In a much more serious note, one oftentimes hears that addicts relapse because they lack willpower. Please do not be someone who says stuff like this. For the most part, addicts will relapse because they are not able to get out of the situation in which they were originally in that resulted in them developing the addictive behaviors in the first place. This is oftentimes seen with, for example, heroin addicts or cocaine addicts or meth addicts, that they go to a clinic, they get clean in the clinic because they're isolated, and then they go back to exactly the same place that they were. And the same logic applies like the chocolate cake. If you're in an environment where everybody else is using, it doesn't take very long for you to start using again. One of the only real effective ways for addicts to truly curb their behaviors is to move themselves into an environment where those temptations are just not present. It's just how we work, people. At the end of the day also, or just maybe not at the end of the day, and on any given day, all of us have different amounts of willpower. Some of us can exert greater control than others, but one common theme that has been found is we can bolster the degree of willpower that any one of us has, and it has been found that either a belief in an unlimited amount of willpower, I can keep going, I will be able to do this, I got this, I can maintain, while it won't give you unlimited willpower, it will tend to increase the amount that you have at your disposal. Another form that's been found to reliably increase people's ability to persevere is through prayer.